Ragone is the author of that book. Nick is here to talk more about some of these history changers, including, we'll get to our current president, but a good Sunday morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
How did you choose these 15 points and these 15 presidents?
Well, I looked for big decisions, ones that would transform the country. They had to elucidate a principle about the presidency, somehow stretch the office, and also decisions that define those legacies. So I was looking for really proactive decisions, not reactive decisions.
Okay, let's go to JFK. And why did he throw down the gauntlet when it came to getting to the moon?
Well, it's interesting. When Sputnik went into orbit and then Yuri Gagarin went into orbit, this country was in a shock. We didn't think that the Soviets were that advanced. JFK wasn't really interested in the science of space. He was more interested in just beating them at something. And he figured I had to set a long-range goal, and the moon was a good one. And so he went about and did it. And I think that's his lasting legacy, if you think about it. Getting to the moon, some of the most iconic images from the 1960s.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it absolutely is. And I mean, going to the moon, for heaven's sake.
And it wouldn't have happened but for his challenge.
Yeah, that's true. He threw it out there. Speaking of throwing down the gauntlet, Ronald Reagan, the evil empire, Russia. Talk to me about that remark and what you think compelled him to say that.
Well, he had been wanting to say that since the 1960s. He was a devout anti-communist, and he really viewed the Cold War in moral terms. It was interesting, the people around him, the Jim Bakkers and Al Higgs and David Gergen and others, didn't really want him to say that. They thought it was impolitic and unpresidential, and he was itching to say it. And a few times he came close to doing it, but it got scrubbed out of the speeches. And finally, in the spring of 1983, the nuclear freeze movement was gaining momentum, and he said, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And he did it. And now historians look back and say that was a transformative moment. It was sort of the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union. He branded them evil, and it sort of defined the Cold War throughout the 80s and you know, into early 90s when the Berlin Wall fell.
In terms of the perspective here, you throw on President Obama and his tackling the health care issue. Why is that worthy of these top 15?
Well, it was an interesting choice. My editor and I debated that back and forth, and she thought it was a really good idea. I do think it's a big transformative decision. Put the politics aside, and I'm not here to debate the right, you know, people agree or disagree with it. But there was about 6 moments when that bill should have died after Scott Brown's special election during the recess of 2009. And it was his persistence. And again, if you look at Jonathan Alter wrote a great book about it. Rahm Emanuel, David Axelrod, some of the people around him didn't really want him to do big universal health care. They wanted him to go about it incrementally. But he made a big bet, and it was, we'll see how it plays out, but it definitely is a defining moment for his legacy. Okay.
Style and substance. Put Obama up against Reagan, Clinton, or Kennedy. Whom do you think he most closely identifies with?
Good question. I'll do a couple. One is, I think Reagan, in some respects, they were known as a great communicator. I think he has a fluency with words. He could paint images with his words, and I think that's very Reagan-esque. I think with Kennedy, Kennedy was about vision and loft, and I think the president was, during the campaign, he was really good on that. I think he's gotten away from that a little bit. President Clinton, I don't know that their styles are very similar. I think Clinton was very emphatic, very emotional. He's emotive. He could, you know, he felt people's pain.
I think cooler.
Yeah, he's much cooler. I think he's starting to learn that, though. After the Tucson speech, you saw the president open up a little bit, and I think he'll learn more of that from Clinton. Yeah,
very good point, that Tucson speech. I agree with that. Nick Ragone, we're going to have you on later this morning and talk further. Thank you.
Great.
Just so you know, with smoking bans becoming the norm in many parts of this country,